Good day, everyone. Today, let's talk about the country's biggest economic value contributor, the food sector industry. Sadly, though, it's also one of the biggest producers of biodegradable waste. More than half of the country's groundwater reserves have been contaminated already by wastewater pollution, which cost the government 1.3 billion US dollars annually. In order to secure and enable the national pursuit for economic growth and sustainable development, the private sector must upgrade its wastewater treatment system. Today, we're here to change that. To have a better understanding of how we can make that change, we will be discussing the wastewater challenges and different treatment options available at the stage activities within the industry subgroup. So let's get started.
Dear members, friends, and partners, a good day to you all from the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome to the third workshop in our wastewater compliance series in the Philippines. With today's focus, the food processing sector. This webinar series, in line with the export program of the German Federal Ministry of the Environment, Natural Conservation and Nuclear Safety, aims to address the compliance of Philippine small and medium enterprises and shall provide you the latest information and technology insights by renowned speakers.
I would briefly announce our valued expert for today, Dr. Jürgen Wummel of Sachsen Wasser. Without further ado, Dr. Wummel, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson. Dear participants, I'm really happy to be here today because wastewater management is something which is very important. We are now with the food processing activities, and what I'm going to do is I would like to give a short overview concerning the food sector, describe the wastewater challenges, the categories, the treatment steps, develop some solutions, have a kind of summary. The demand for wastewater treatment is immense, and one of the manufacturing industry is the food industry. During the last century, there's a huge amounts of industrial wastewater, and this huge amount of industrial wastewater was normally discharged into the rivers, lakes, and the coastal area. And of course, this results in serious pollution problems, might even have caused negative effects to the ecosystem and the human life. Industrial wastewater from the food sector is necessary to be treated, and this wastewater treatment process for food sector describes the processes used for treating wastewater that is made by the food industry or an undesirable byproduct. And after the treatment, these food sector wastewater may be reused for domestic purpose, maybe gardening, reused within the own industry. The food sector differs. Different sources contribute to the generation of wastewater in the food processing industry, especially includes the meat processing, the dairy product. There are special wastewaters for the seafood and fish processing, as well as for the fruit and vegetable processing. Sugar, alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverages, bean products, they all produce wastewater which can be characterized and is influenced and is named and is classified by the so-called biochemical oxygen demand, BOD. It is classified, it is differences between all the amount of fats, oil, and grease, FOGs, which are produced within the wastewater of the food sector. Suspended solids and nitrogen and phosphorus, of course, they all are part of the content of the wastewater within the food processing. And therefore, BOD reduction is used as a gauge for the effectiveness of wastewater treatment plants. BOD of wastewater effluent is used to indicate the short-term impact on the oxygen levels of the receiving water. The FOG is entering the wastewater system because it caused several problems, and it caused problems both in drains and, of course, wastewater collection system. When fats and oils and grease enter the drainage system, they mix with food and other sanitary waste, congeal and harden in the pipe. In addition to these unpleasant odor, FOG-related blockages can result in sewage overflow due to reduced capacity or burst even drain and sewer pipes. Suspended solids, They refer to the small solid particles which remain in the suspension in water as a colloid or due to motion of the water. And suspended solids, of course, they can be removed by sedimentation and the removal of nitrogen and phosphorus, of course. That has become an emergent worldwide concern because these components cause eutrophication in natural water. The food sector characteristics, there is a large seasonal variation. There is even a large hourly variation and concentration in daytime. The factories in the food sector in the Philippines, they are often of a very small case. Mostly, they have a very unbalanced ration of, as mentioned before, BOD, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And even the color effluent might cause a problem within the food sector. Normally, the wastewater is categorized in more or less three easy categories. Wastewater is either has either a high concentration, a medium concentration, or a low concentration. The way of treating it depends on the quality, on the concentration of the wastewater. And especially high concentrated wastewater needs to be treated. There might be even a chance to recycle part of the wastewater. The medium concentration is quite often a concentration which can be solved by on-site activities, pre-treating before either discharging into the public sewer or into the lakes and rivers concerning the obligation mentioned before. While low concentration, for example, cooling the water, that this quite often might be discharged even without any kind of treatment. So the huge challenge within the food sector are organic residual wastes, sludge from the wastewater treatment, food waste, garbage accompanied with consumption. And all these activities, they are created within the food sector. And among the waste of this group, the solid waste, plastic waste, the categories for food processing, the vegetable, the dairy, the meat, the brewery, and the wine industry, of course, these categories, they have more or less general effluent standards. They shall be enforced to all point sources of pollution according to the Philippine regulation, regardless of volume that discharge to the receiving body of water or land, and they should be used regardless of the industry categories. Most of them is named in Sector 7, and the obligation is that the general effluent standard established a significant effluent quality parameter. And you can see within this part of the whole general effluent standards obligations that the significant parameters differ a little bit concerning to your sector within the food sector. Not using these obligations mean it is a challenge, especially if you compare the wastewater between a normal household and a dairy plant. We have to focus on find solutions for different steps within the food sector, within the dairy production and processing. And by working with the different steps in production and processing, you can influence the wastewater contents, the wastewater activities, the wastewater indicators like BOD, SS, POG, and so on. And that is nothing which is only part for the dairy industry. It's the same for the seafood industry. All sectors, all activities within the food sector, they focused on temperatures, solids, organic materials. And all these activities are necessary because they are not only impacting very much the quality in brackets of the wastewater, but they do have an impact on the environment. They do have an impact on the activities which has to be done to create a better quality of the wastewater, to create a wastewater which can be handed over to the water body or which can be used within the whole process of food processing a second time. If we are in the fruit and vegetable processing industry, there are a lot of high organic loads, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, solid salt, nitrogen, phosphorus as well. And the normal way to treat these is to use a pre-treatment to take off the solids and to use a secondary treatment to make a biological purification on either an aerobic and or an anaerobic. While for the sector of slaughterhouse and meat processing, the most important wastewater components are the suitable solids, again, fats, oils, and grease, of course, and organic materials. And here, flotation, precipitation is necessary in a kind of mechanical treatment process. Sugar processing is a little bit easier to handle. There are a high organic load, of course. Nitrogen and phosphorus are at a very low level. And that means that the mechanical process with mess screens and sedimentation is easy to handle. And then afterwards, there's a long time batch process, a small scale technical process, usually consisting of anaerobic and pre-treatment and aerobic post-treatment to reduce the high organic loss. Oil, of course, is the main factor within this, but besides this, acid and alkalis, especially acid water, is a result out of these kind of process. Here, grease reduction is very important. Therefore, a gravity separator is necessary or should be implemented in wastewater treatment technology. The mechanical separator, flotation, and centrifuges are necessary to separate especially fats and oil, and the chemical process tries to separate by using the release agents, especially the acids. Biological processes are the same. They are not so important in this case, as mentioned before. The huge milk production is something where there is a higher carbon concentrates. There is a nitrogen concentration. Depending on the milk processing, on the dairy activities, there might be high phosphorus loads. All the rest, fats, protein, lactose, salts, are not so much important. Therefore, to separate the fatty substances, grease separator is necessary, flotation, and again, aerobic biological treatment. While the milk might have high carbon concentrate, the beverages and malt houses, there is organic matter, which is important, and settleable solids. Strong fluctuation in the pH value. It differs in the beverages between 3 to 12, and also the temperatures are within this kind of food processing industry. These high temperatures between 20 and 30 degrees produce a challenge within the wastewater treatment technologies. There should be implemented bar screen, sewage system, mixing and balancing tanks, sedimentation and anaerobic pre-treatment for looking at the organic components. Aerobic post-treatment, the secondary treatment with activated sludge processes and with a kind of sand filtration are necessary to treat the wastewater from this food. And the last might be the sector with fruit juice. We do have, again, a very high organic materials, nitrogen, phosphorus, solids, and therefore pre-treatment for the wastewater is important. Solid separation is necessary. A challenge within the fruit juice industry in the western part is a huge difference between the daily flows. So balancing the daily flow might be a solution for the wastewater treatment activities as well. Buffering of pH should be managed within these pre-treatment activities as well. And the secondary treatment, of course, a biological stage in the form of aerobic submerged fixed bed system or final sedimentation. All these solutions from septic tanks to secondary treatment have different levels of qualities. They have different effluent qualities. To find a solution which is suitable to the situation which is in line with your company, there is not one solve-it-all solution. Therefore, assessing the needs, the resources, and the capabilities is step one within this process. Step two is to look who else might be working maybe at the same level as you. What are the characteristic factors of your neighborhoods? Then consider alternatives for wastewater solutions, because always the best way of not to treat all the wastewater, but to separate water streams within the utility. Maybe there is a kind of reuse, maybe there is a kind of reduction, because the less amount, less volume which has to be treated, the more effective and the more costly is the situation. So you save money by considering alternatives for wastewater treatment. And please bear in mind that the cost and the complexity of the operations, maintenance, and management should be part of the decision which is the right wastewater treatment. This precise commodity has to be reused, recycled, and used as efficiently as possible. Treated wastewater can be cost efficient, sustainable, safe, and a reliable alternative source for water. And last but not least, I personally think that we need to change our mindset to raise awareness and to redouble the educational efforts to share the benefits of the wastewater reuse. Thank you for listening.
Yes, Dr. Wummel, thank you very much for the insight that you shared with us today. There are a couple of questions. How can one classify the type of concentration of wastewater they have?
Normally, wastewater is classified either according to BOD or it is classified, especially in the food sector, it will be BOD. We are talking about other sectors later. So there are other indicators like phosphor, Kohlenstoff C. So they are classified in different ways. Normally, the classification of the wastewater is not so important in the Philippines, the way I do understand, because in the Philippines, there are, as shown before, some indicators which in brackets classify the wastewater. And they say, for example, the temperature CPBOD classifies according to the sector. I showed you the example for the food sector, for the meat sector, and there were the indicators temperatures, pH, BOD, total suspended solids, oil and grease. But the indicator depends on the sector. And what has to be in mind is that this is very important for the wastewater. What is the receiving body? And normally the receiving body has indicators as well. So it is more important that you are fulfilling the indicators of the receiving body than classifying your own wastewater according to some system.
What treatment options are available for strong wastewater in the dairy industry? As an example, they gave more than 3,000 milligram per LI in the BOD.
There are a lot of treatment opportunities, especially for strong wastewaters. 3,000 milliliter BOD for sure is a very strong wastewater. The only way how to treat this is to use, you cannot treat this with primary treatment. You need a secondary treatment. You need aerobic and anaerobic treatment methodologies. There are a lot of treatment activities. Some we are using here, for example, membrane treatment, but you can also use sequent batch reactors. There are a lot of technologies, but all of them are part of the so-called secondary treatment system.
Yeah, thank you very much. These were the questions that were asked. Of course, by your participants, if there are any further questions, you can also direct them directly to us or to Dr. Wummel directly. And with this, I want to close today's session and want to thank everyone again for your participation, the members and network and friends of the Chamber. And of course, also Dr. Wummel for being our lead expert of today. And last but not least, I just want to say thank you again for everyone. I wish everyone a nice afternoon still, and please stay safe and healthy, and see you in the upcoming workshops. Goodbye.